I honestly thought this counselor was out of their mind. I thought this was the poorest advice anyone could give. I was just angry about everything. If it wasn't my way or things weren't done a certain way and decisions weren't made this way or that, I was going to be pissed off and people were going to have to pay for it. I spent many nights crying over dinner. For me, the first time in my life that I was ever alone. And it was very difficult for me to stomach that.
But until you had that complete cutoff, you didn't actually make a decision, hey, 1 second, I need a whole complete transformation. That's the moment where you can communicate subconsciously to her real love, or that love gets blocked out by her feeling that you're not there for her. This is very, very important. It sounds so simple, but it takes a lot of work.
You got to really work on yourself and be cognizant of others. I was sitting in a studio apartment for 6 months by myself, trying to figure out what I needed to do to win her back, all the while pushing her away. And it wasn't until I stopped and really reflected on myself and where I was emotionally and mentally.
You have to be willing to take a deep look at yourself and go through the process of understanding, 1 second, who is your best version? Who did God design you to be? Who are you meant to be?
It felt like I was releasing that from myself.
And when you do that, that's when the image starts changing. That's when the subconscious communication starts changing. I'm over here live with Mike Logan. Hey, Mike.
Hey, David.
It's been a while. I think the last time we interviewed you was in 2021, but the first time was in November of 2020. Quite a few guys have seen the interviews we've done together, and every now and then, guys ask me, what's going on with Mike Logan? So, Mike, do you mind taking a minute, just introduce yourself to the guys, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Mike Logan. About 2 years now, was in a pretty desperate situation with my marriage, and we had separated, lived separately. I had been looking passively at David's program and his Facebook page and stuff, like many of you probably are.
I think it was November 2020 was the first time we spoke. That's 2.5 years ago. How long were you in the Facebook group before that?
I would say probably just under a year. I was in the public Facebook group, casually
lurking,
watching videos and participating in the chats and posts on Facebook. I think it was in May of 2020 when I moved out into my own place and I was really hit hard emotionally and mentally over that happening. And that's when I started getting a little more serious in looking for an option for me. Unfortunately, and maybe by some other higher power, it came to me when we spoke finally in November.
Let's talk more about what's going on in May 2020. You've been here for a couple of months. You still got separated. You said you were hit hard mentally and emotionally. What was going on?
Oh, just to be out into my own space. I moved out of the house. It was my wife and her daughter seeing a counselor, and it came as a pretty heavy advice from their counselor that I move out of the house.
So it was the counselor that suggested that you should move out. Okay. And and at the time you were married to Dawn for how long?
Since 2015.
Okay, so it was already 5 years at the time. And this is your second marriage, correct?
Correct.
Got it. So when you found out that you needed to separate as a result of the advice of this counselor, what was running through your head?
I honestly thought this counselor was out of their mind. I thought this was the poorest advice anyone could give. Just that moving your husband out of the house or them moving out was going to solve all the problems that was going on in a marriage, which it absolutely was not. In my opinion, I was fully against it.
And in November 2020, what made you reach out? Because you've been, like I said, you've been lurking in the group for 8 months or a year.
Yeah.
What made you click? If you can just share with guys watching this, like, what was that moment of decision that you were like, hey, it's 6 months. Well, why not wait 6 years? And I don't mean to be facetious, but what's the process of saying, okay, it's November, I need help? What actually went on behind the scenes?
For me, I'd actually been seeing my own counselor for a while, and then I had stopped, moved out on my own. Dawn and I were kind of seeing each other off and on, going to dinner and such, trying to maintain and rebuild or do something with our relationship. And with the separation and my feelings about it, it was generally would get pretty heated at times. And it was at, I think, the beginning of August of 2020 when she cut me off completely. We had a fight. I was really angry, letting her know how I felt, and she just completely cut me off, and then we didn't talk. August, September.
Got it. So what made you reach out finally and say, okay?
And that was when I was, I think, grasping for anything I could do. I was in shock. I was very emotional, upset. I spent many nights crying over dinner. It was through that experience, for me, the first time in my life that I was ever alone. And it was very difficult for me to stomach that. And so that's where I reached out and said, I've got to do something. And at that point, for me, it was being the second marriage. It was, I have got to do something to either save, you do last ditch effort to save this that I have, and if nothing else, to fix myself to be better for the future.
So that was a combination. So there was both of those things. It was about the marriage, but it was also about yourself. Hey, why is this happening? What's with me that it was your second marriage? And your first one was a pretty long marriage, right?
21 years.
21 years. So we're not talking, you weren't like 32 years old when you joined. You had a history. Yeah. You're looking back at 30, 40 years of your life and reassessing that. It's important to know this because a lot of guys are at the stage of, they know they need help, but as long as they have some form of a contact with their wife, until you were actually cut off completely, you still were grasping, you're still trying to, hoping that he can maybe convince her, maybe manipulate her, explain to her, justify. But until you had that complete cutoff, you didn't actually make a decision. Hey, 1 second, I need a whole complete transformation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fun part. It's June 2023 right now. What's going on in your marriage, right? Because this is the question guys ask. Is Mike Logan still married? Is Mike Logan still doing well? Why don't you give us a little bit of a glimpse? What's going on right now between you and Dawn?
Things are, from my vantage point, things are great. We're doing wonderful. We're getting along well. We're different than we were 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We're different in the way that we communicate with each other. We're happy. We still have fights. We still disagree on finances and direction for where we're going to go and stuff. But I feel empowered, like I have this seen, unspoken kind of toolbox of things that I just come unconsciously when she reacts, or I say something and I see the way she reacts, and it just comes out of me where I'm more cognizant of the situation. But yeah, generally very happy, getting along well. We've been carpooling every day to work, so we get together in the morning and the afternoon and vacationing together and just enjoying life.
Can you tell us a specific moment you've had recently, a happy moment, whether it's vacation or something really sweet that stood out to you, like, hey, this is beautiful?
Oh, geez. What did she say to me? She says stuff to me. She drops these little bombs all the time, these little compliments to me. And I feel like, oh, gee.
Like, for example?
The other day, we made enchiladas for dinner, which that's our thing. We love food. We love to cook and get very elaborate with it.
So what happened?
She was like, we work so well together when we're cooking. That made me feel really good because historically, it was not very good together in the kitchen. I would get very demanding or nitpicky with her, and she's not doing things a certain way. So it was nice to see her say, and in that particular comment, she didn't tell me, she was telling other people.
Oh, that's the best. Those comments are the best because sometimes we'll try to squeeze a compliment out of our wives. I know what it's like, but when I hear her saying something on the phone to someone else, and it's a genuine compliment, man, it feels good, man. But you know what? I love what you just said, Mike, before you described an amazing marriage, which doesn't have the glitz and glamour of no arguments. Like, you have disagreements. Right? You even use the word fight, but you're not getting separated over those disagreements. You're not having a breakdown of communication. It's normal to have disagreements. You are two separate human beings who love each other. There's so much you see in each other, but yet you are individual in some level. And what I appreciate is that you share that, yeah, we have these disagreements over finances and whatever it may be, but over time, those disagreements typically helps you understand each other better. Even if you disagree, at least you know each other. Can we touch on something, Mike, that you said about you had this unconscious toolkit, which you can reach into, and like, wow, I love the way you described it. Unconscious Toolkit. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that seems to be the place you go to know what to do, what to say. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. A very recent story this morning. She drove to work. I stayed home today. She called me and told me that there was a little fender bender, a little bang up with the car. And I could feel right away this anger coming out of me. What the heck is going on? What did you do? This is terrible. And it's in those moments like that, it'd be a disagreement over paying bills or other things. It just kind of washes over me. I get that out right away. I'm angry. But different from the past, pre-AMFT for me, is that it just kind of this calm washes over me. And I'm able to communicate to her like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm glad you're well. This is just a thing. I'm angry about it, but it's something we'll work through. No big deal.
And this is huge. It sounds like it's benign and it's little, but you hinted to it. And guys, let me know in the comments if you get this. This is so important. It's key moments like what you just described that actually makes the difference between an incredible relationship versus one that keeps on being drawn down towards fights and separation, towards misunderstanding. That's the moment where you can communicate subconsciously to her real love, or that love gets blocked out by her feeling that you're not there for her. This is very, very important. It sounds so simple, but it takes a lot of work because a lot of guys may know, hey, I should be level-headed. I should be calm. There's a world of a difference between I should be calm versus actually effectively and intelligently and strategically communicating calm, presence, love. I'm here for you. Could we pick on something just which is on people's minds? You were separated in November 2020. You reach out for help. You joined AMFT at that point. How long did it take for you to dial back in that connection with Dawn?
I think it was the first week for me. I think it was almost right away.
Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, I was laying there in bed, and it was early morning. I knew she typically headed off somewhere early morning. She's a nurse to be off to many different hospitals. I reached out to her through text and said, hello, good morning. How are you doing, or whatever? And she responded immediately, which was shocking for me at the time because I hadn't heard from her in 2 months. The same feeling then is the same thing I experienced this morning. She mentioned about having to work crazy hours, and she's working all the time and overworked or whatever in the text. And I just told her, I'm sorry you have to work that much. Her immediate next response, I'll never forget it, was, who am I talking to?
Was that via text or she called you back?
No, she called me. I'm sorry, you are correct. She called, the phone rang next, and she said, who am I talking to? This is not Mike Logan that I know. What's going on?
And what was your first reaction when she said that?
I was honestly dumbfounded. I didn't know why she was asking that. I truly was kind of clueless.
That's funny. Do you realize what's so funny about that? You had a major breakthrough in your marriage, but you didn't understand why that happened.
Yeah, it had a body experience for me.
Right. And what I want to point out is you said something very important before. You said Unconscious Toolkit, right? The most important skill that you're learning in it, you said AMFT, which means Amazing Match Fast Track, is the ability to know which skill to pick, which tool to pick, right? What would you say to somebody who says, okay, maybe I should just text my wife and tell her how I feel sorry she has to work so hard. Maybe that will turn around my marriage. What would you tell somebody who suggests that?
That it probably won't work.
Why wouldn't it work? Like it worked for you. Why wouldn't it work for somebody else?
Because it's not coming from the heart. If you're just taking something that's written in a book and texting that to your wife or saying it's your wife, she's going to know that's not you. It's going to come across. For me, like I say, it was. I don't even know where it came from, this place of compassion and
intuition.
Yeah.
Intuition. Let's talk about intuition a little bit more. Where have you found that intuition kicking in outside of your marriage? Once you know this, you have this unconscious toolkit, which we often call subconscious communication. But once you know it, you do see benefits in other parts of your life. It's impossible not to see them. Would you mind to share a little bit about that? Where have you seen, or where have your friends seen changes in you where you're like, oh my gosh, my relationships outside of my marriage have been changing as well?
Yeah, I'd have to go look in my notebook for the specific, but I noticed it from my sister-in-law. If I remember back, my sister-in-law right away had texted me something where she has never contacted me before in my life outside of seeing me face to face at a family function or whatever, but she had reached out and commented about something different about me. I had gone over for dinner or something, and they had a great time and whatnot. And that was a wonderful feeling for me because I've never heard anything like that out of her. Nothing bad about her. It was, I think, ultimately looking back, maybe a lot of things were me. And not just in that relationship, both of my daughters have had right away, unknowing that I was seeking help and getting help. Both of my daughters communicated to me that something was different, that they noticed things were kind of the same comment that Dawn said, who am I talking to? Both of my kids were like, who's this dad?
That's an incredible thing.
As well as work. In my workplace, my interactions with my coworkers and my boss and things like that have given me a more level-headedness, I guess, more cognizant about people's emotions and the way they're interacting with me. And yeah.
Yeah, and just a little bit of explanation, if I may. Like we talk about subconscious communication a lot, Mike, and a lot of the guys in the Facebook group think that I do teach this. They think this is the main focus. How do I communicate to my wife certain things? We do teach that in AMFT, but it starts with actually communicating with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You just said, like, the reason why your daughters are saying these things and your sister-in-law and people around you are reaching out to you, even though you never said anything to them. Why is that happening? Think about it. You never said anything to them. How come they're saying, hey, I noticed these changes. This is great. There's something about your aura. There's something about you subconsciously with yourself, which sends out a very powerful message. We talk a lot about the image. Like the way wives process information is they get stuck in the past. So your wife, Dawn, for example, was stuck in the past. She had a certain picture of you in her head. And once you shatter that picture, automatically everything changes. Because now she questions the picture. Now the picture gets broken. Now she allows herself to interact with you based on where you are today, as opposed to interacting with a memory of you. Can you elaborate, if you're okay with it, what was that memory that Dawn was talking to up until you broke through that barrier? To whatever extent you feel comfortable. How would you describe that picture that she had stuck in her head?
The first word that comes to my mind is anger. This came from both of my daughters too. I was just angry. I can't think of another adjective. I was just angry about everything. If it wasn't my way or things weren't done a certain way and decisions weren't made this way or that, I was going to be pissed off and people were going to have to pay for it.
But here's an interesting thing. Were there times that you were not angry, but Dawn still believed you were angry?
Yeah, I believe so. I can't pick out a single or a specific moment, but yeah, where I've recall saying, I'm not angry. What are you talking about?
And that's what I'm talking about. That once a woman has that picture in her head, she keeps interacting with you and communicating with you from that space. How many guys watching this get this? How many guys experience where your wife, she may have had a legitimate point where she got the wrong picture in her head, where she feels like, okay, you're selfish, you're manipulative, you're whatever, you're not a good listener, or you're stuck in a, whatever it is. Even when you change that, she's still talking to a memory of you. Let me know in the comments. And Mike, this is a very common thing. A lot of guys go through this where they end up being stuck in the past because their wife is stuck in the past. What would you say to a guy, for example, the guy that commented about he's just separated now because that was the nail in the coffin because he wasn't calm the other night? What would be the first piece of advice you would give them? What would you say to give them hope?
You got to really work on yourself and be cognizant of others. I was sitting in a studio apartment for 6 months by myself, trying to figure out what I needed to do to win her back, all the while pushing her away. And it wasn't until I stopped and really reflected on myself and where I was emotionally and mentally. I think you really need to take the time to look into yourself and kind of heal what's going on with you and be right with yourself. And things will come from that.
Right. And we have quite a few trainings here that help people jumpstart the process to take a look at yourself, because nobody could do that for you. You got to do it for yourself to first explore and see, 1 second, is there a pattern over here? How long has it gone on for? What has this affected? Where do I want to go? And then after that, it took you a while. After that, you reached out for help and said, okay, I'm ready. What do I do practically, strategically? How do I interact with Dawn? What do I say? What do I do? But you first have to step back and have that deep look at yourself like you just described. What would you say was your biggest challenge after you joined Amazing Match Fast Track? What would you say was your biggest challenge?
I was a little overwhelmed at first, afraid that I wasn't going to. Just like anything else you decide to do, you slide right into it and it's something you want and you begin working way at it.
What happened that made you say, okay, I can do this work for another 7, 8, 9 weeks?
The self-realization, it was eye-opening for me as I began working with the material and what it caused me to see in myself and see, gosh, just a flood of emotions and memories throughout my life of things where I just wasn't aligned well with myself, where I could start to recall like, oh, wow, these people were pissed at me, but I didn't care because I didn't even realize they were angry about such a thing.
You did care, you just didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Right.
I don't think I had many emotional nights by myself over my situation, but I say I had some pretty strong emotional nights working through the material and having these realizations of who I was, who I truly am, and who I wasn't that man.
Right. Can I elaborate on that? You just hit the jackpot. And for the guys watching this who are trying to understand the process, you have to be willing to take a deep look at yourself and go through the process of understanding, 1 second, who is your best version? Who did God design you to be? Who are you meant to be? Even if you don't believe in God, what is your best possible person? And then where are you? And what has happened that separated you from that? It's not pain-free, but I can guarantee that the tears you went through then were different than the tears you went through just from being separated.
Agreed. Yes.
All right. And how would you describe the difference?
More intense.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
More intense. But you're 100% correct. As well as being more intense, it was way more freeing to release. It felt like I was releasing that from myself.
And when you do that, that's when the image starts changing. That's when the subconscious communication starts changing. That's when people start noticing your changes. If I recall, didn't you have an experience with your brother like a week into the program? You were debating if you should continue doing the full AMFT or just that first week. And your brother, you had a little interaction with him about that.
Yeah, for sure. You're making me want to run to my notebook. Yeah, I did have it. I reached out
What
to
happened?
him and told him about what I was doing. And if I remember correctly, he was like, if you don't do this, where are you going to be kind of thing? And saying, this is amazing that you're doing this.
Surprised by what? When you said surprised, what was...
He was surprised that I was even in that space, that I was considering that I had problems or that I was seeking to better myself or anything.
Basically,
like
the fact that you accepted that you weren't perfect and that you made mistakes and that you're human.
Yeah, that was
a big surprise to him.
big surprise to him. And then he was like, and I was questioning, should I do this? Should I move forward with this? And he was like, you have to. If you want all the things that you're talking about, and wanting my marriage back and wanting to be a better person and realizing some of the things that some of the tendencies I'd had throughout the years, he was blown away that I had this sense about those things.
The awareness, the desire, the growth. Wow.
He didn't see, he probably would have never told anybody that I'd ever done anything like that. He was kind of basically didn't write me off, but that's Mike. That's how he is, or that's who he is.
You mean like
my relationship was strained with him. And like I said, my sister-in-law, my sister, my ex-wife, my kids.
We talk about the other people, not just your wife, because when you make those changes in yourself, it's impossible not to impact other people. And I tell guys who explore the program, I say very clearly, this is not just about your marriage. But one of the things I forgot to talk about is the relationship with your stepdaughter. She was actually the reason why the counselor told you guys to separate, right? Brilliant advice. Tell us a little bit about what your relationship is with her right now, if you can.
Sure. It's kind of level. Before it was very up and down, angry, screaming, fighting, pushing back. And we actually just had an amazing breakthrough the other day. It's been pretty straight and level lately. And I have a lot of conversations with Dawn about it. We work on it from our end between each other because that caused a lot of problems.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, I mean, just having a stepdaughter in the mix is a challenge. Regardless of what's going on, it is a challenge. Even when things are going well, it's a challenge. If that challenge then starts hurting the marriage, you double challenge on your hands, which is why you got separated. How long did it take for you guys to move? How long, you had a breakthrough within a week. How long did it take for you guys to start dating again or seeing each other again? I'm not talking about moving back in, but to start spending time together or nights together. How long did that take?
That's where I think it was within a week or two, we were going to dinner again.
Oh, wow.
She came to my house and we went to dinner somewhere there. We had dinner and she went back to the house. Then we made plans for another night. I think the first thing we did was brunch on a Saturday. I met her at a restaurant and we had brunch, talked and chatted and went our separate ways. And then the next time was dinner and it just kind of
went from there. But I think it took a while to move back in because you still have to resolve the issue with your stepdaughter. If I recall correctly, it took almost a year or something like that to actually move back in to the same place permanently.
Yeah, it was late 2021. Actually, that same counselor had pushed for us to leave California and move back to Arizona. That was a whole different story to delve into, but we moved to Arizona separately. She had her apartment. I got an apartment in Arizona. We got jobs. Yeah.
It took 11 months or so, something like that.
In May of 2020, and I moved back in to the new place where I'm at now.
Right. I was calculating from when you joined MFT.
Yes.
Because prior to MFT doesn't count. I was thinking, guys always ask, how quick does it work? But in your case, you had a breakthrough within a week, and within 2 weeks, you guys were going out to dinner together, but you had the issue with your stepdaughter. That took about 10, 11 months. I really appreciate the time you took. It was just eye-opening. Let me know what you gained from this interview. Shout out to Mike Logan. I really appreciate it. If you truly want to change and you have the real motivation and commitment, you can do it. Mike Logan alluded to it, that it takes work. It does take time. But we have people in the program who are very busy running their own companies, in the military, very hectic schedules, finding the time to do it. It's a matter of realizing the importance. It's a matter of making it important. The strategy we provide, but the only thing we cannot provide is the willingness on your end. Problems people have is a terminal uniqueness. My wife is so difficult. My life is so difficult. My marriage has challenges that nobody else has ever seen. I have unique traumas. And I'm not making light of that. It's important to deal with, but that's just my message. Anybody can do this. With that, I'm going to duck out and wish you guys a great evening, and I'll catch you guys next week, Monday.